Americans, you are fortunate to live in a country that was founded on principles that have paved the way for freedom. The ideas valued and portrayed in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution with its Bill of Rights have such self-evident truth as to reveal the flaws in our past as well as the injustice of our day. When the founders wrote that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, they were acknowledging universal truths that would eventually set free their own slaves. Principles such as the separation of powers set forth guides for limiting the abuses of liberty. Natural rights, as simple as the right to life and self-defense, are accepted in these documents as sacred truths of freedom. These principles are as old as the earth and find their source in the Creator. When we hold these truths as precious, we can stand up and speak with moral authority and put to shame those who would take away our freedoms. Our history is full of heroes who have appealed to these truths and won freedom for those burdened by the abuse of power. We as a people would do well to realize that such principles and these heroes are the heritage of freedom for all Americans.
Good morning, Americans, and welcome to Mr. Asplin's Citizenship course. Today I have a real simple lesson for you about interpreting the Constitution and a very special guest with us today. Let's start with an example. Imagine your poor ailing grandmother has just passed away, and your whole family is sitting around her living room waiting for her will to be read. Unfortunately, while the will is being read, you hear your grandma talking in her old-fashioned language, and she is using words that don't make sense to you. Let me give you an example. I didn't want to put butter on bacon when I wrote up my will, so it's to the point. I won't be no church bell. I'm dead and you want my worldly possessions. After today, you might feel like you'll take the egg. But don't forget your poor old grandma. You all know that my Cadillac is bang up to the elephant. My grandson John, you take that Cadillac and treat her like your own baby. Now, I don't want any collie shangles about that car. You'll all get your chance. We don't use many of those expressions today. How do people know what these words mean? We ask the very same question about our U.S. Constitution. Like, what does Congress mean? What is treason? What is the militia? Today, my fellow Americans, I will teach you the secret. There are two rules to remember. Let's take a look.
So our goal as citizens is to understand the Constitution, and by doing so, we are looking back at the original intent of the document. Like any document that is important to us, we look back at the purpose for which it was drawn up. And there are principles that tie everything together that we know that were written in the Constitution, and we pull those out from the text itself. And those principles guide the text. And so these two rules are the Constitution defines itself, and then we look to history. So Congress, we know what that means because they defined it clearly in the Constitution, in the text itself. But there are other words like jury or habeas corpus or felony or state, and we look at these words and we're like, they're not clearly defined in the Constitution. What did they mean when they said a jury? Well, you look back at the laws, the statutes, and the practices of the people during the time, and you will see then the practice of those words and how they defined them in their laws. And you would say, oh, well, those principles that they are using for the word jury are similar to today. And maybe the principles are applied a little bit differently, but you don't want to go away from what the Constitution actually says. And that is important. Another thing to remember is the principles themselves, like representative government, separation of powers, checks and balances, the divine right to rule is from the people themselves, And the people elect representatives to carry out their wishes or to carry out their concerns and their means of protection. And that's what is really going on with government, is their purpose is to protect our natural rights, which we're all born with. Even though it wasn't always practiced, that is the original intent in the text of the Constitution. There are problems when we get into interpreting the Constitution without original intent. People will throw in their own ideas and their own meaning, and that ends up harming our rights, and it ends up taking our country in a totally different direction. And if we don't abide by the Constitution and we go into a different direction, then we are a lost people. We have no conclusive guide, no reference point in which to guide us. It's so important. The U.S. Constitution makes provisions for how it should be amended or changed. We can't just change it based on our own ideas. It also guides us in principle and in text with the means to face the challenges of protecting our rights and living out the pursuit of our happiness.
We have a special guest on the show today. I'm delighted to introduce to you our dear Grandma Olspin. Ms. Olspin, thank you for appearing on my show today.
First of all, I'm a grandma. You will call me Grandma Olspin. Where has the respect for grandmothers gone these days?
I apologize, Grandma Olspin. Thank you for being here today. I thought you could share with our fellow Americans some of your wisdom. Well, okay. My lesson is about interpreting the Constitution by learning to use the text itself for clues, and then when we see terms we can't really understand, we look back in history to how they used and applied it.
Boy, you're telling me.
Anyway, a few days ago, I sent you a copy of the text we would discuss today. You have that with you? Okay, I thought you could give us some insight into this dear old lady's will.
Grandma! She was a grandma! She was not just an old lady. What is your first question?
Well, the first question, we can look at the first two lines, where it starts with butter on bacon and I won't be no church bell. Do you know what those expressions mean?
Sure. If you noticed, Grandma says she wants to get to the point. She's not gonna put up with a lot of frilly sounding, attorney sounding words. And you don't hear those church bells anymore. They used to ring so loud you could barely get a word in edgewise.
So you're telling me that butter on bacon is official sounding words, and the church bell means she wasn't going to write a lot of words.
You know, I think the most important thing about this whole document is that she was a grandma. Sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Grandma is the most important principle. You kids out there, you give your grandma a call. And when you call her, you tell her you want to talk. Tell her about your school. Oh, she won't know much about on internet learning, but she'll love to talk about it, and she'll like to tell you all about her day.
Thank you, Grandma Olspin. You have such a way with words. I think we all need to do better at connecting with the past and learning the most important principles. I've taught you two simple rules about finding out what the Constitution means. You look at the text, and then if you can't define it there, you look back to history and see how they defined it then. I'll leave you with one question. What do you think would happen if we started reading our own thoughts and interpretations into important documents? Until next time, be strong, be merciful, and take care.
Now, you kids out there, I want you to listen up really good. Listen to your grandma. This is Grandma Olspin speaking. I want you to click that thumbs up thingy on your button down there. Where is it? Oh, you said it's right there? Oh, down over here, the thumbs up button. And you share the page.